everybody. Welcome to Campaign's latest online briefing, cross-platform content, how to do it right. I'm Austin Allison, the editor of Campaign Middle East. You can check out Campaign's campaign at campaign.com. You can listen to our podcast on Angami or wherever you get your podcasts. You can check out Campaign, getting ahead of myself there. You can go to our website and register for Marcoms 360 Predictions 2022, which is our flagship annual event taking place physically as well as streamed on November the 11th at 5 the Palm. We've got some great issues coming up in the magazine as well. If you're an outdoor company, then you can make sure that you get in touch with me or my colleague Nadeem to be listed in our out-of-home guide at the end of October. And on September 26th, we'll be publishing our power list. Thanks a lot, guys, for taking the time to join us for what's going to be a couple of really interesting conversations. Thanks a million to our sponsors, of course, MMS and TikTok. I'm sure you know them both, but on the off chance you've been living under a media stone, MMS is the NBC Group's commercial arm, connecting brands and people with premium content and driving growth for brands through different offerings and solutions across the group's platforms. And TikTok, TikTok's immersive short-form video gives businesses a platform to participate and engage with a community known for its creativity, ingenuity, and joy. I have been roped in already by my colleagues to doing at least one TikTok video, so you can find me frowning on our new TikTok channel. This webinar that you're on now highlights how content should live on different platforms and how to utilize it for best outcomes. This means taking into consideration audience behavior and so on. So the webinar speakers are going to share tips on how advertisers can capitalize on cross-platform content from a client and an agency point of view. I've got two panels today, and in the second one, we've asked a leading university professor to lead a discussion about global cross-platform campaign. It's an all-star panel, and that promises to be really lively. Before that, I have the pleasure of hosting our first panel, which is called Across the Board, the right content on the right platform. So I would like to welcome Richard Addington from NBC Media Solutions. Hello, Richard.
Hi, Austin.
And what's your title at NBC, Richard? Just fill us in on that. Or is that a top secret? Or are we between?
To be confirmed. No, basically.
What's your role of specialism there?
I run one of the agency partnerships teams that we have here at MMS. So we've split the market into two groups of agencies. I run one of them, so I lead the relationship with MCN, with Omnicom Media Group, with Havas, and a few of the other agencies in the region.
Excellent. So you'll be no stranger to our next panelist, who is Maya Bouajram, who is the Deputy GM at UAE. Hi, Maya, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm very well, thanks, very well. And I think that finishing off our trinity of all-star panelists, we have Toby Jezard, who is the Senior Offline Marketing Manager at Delivery Hero. And for those of you who don't know what Delivery Hero is, I suspect that that's very, very few of you, but we'll ask Tony to I've got to stop calling you Tony, Toby. It's just set in my mind. I keep sending you emails that say Tony. There's no way around it. We're going to have to get your name changed by default.
Panelist, so I'll forgive you for that slip up. But yeah. Thanks for the introduction. As you say, I work at Delivery Hero, so people in MENA will probably be most familiar with our consumer brands there. So Talabat in UAE and most of the Gulf and Egypt, Hunger Station if you're based in KSA, and also Yemek Sepeti in Turkey.
Brilliant. So now we're talking about cross-platform content, and I'd like to start off by figuring out what that actually means. It's a nice, neat phrase, but if I could go to you, Maya, as the sort of agency person who sees a lot of brands on a lot of platforms, what is cross-platform content? What does it mean? What does it mean to you?
Sure. So very simply, cross-platform content is content that lives on multiple touch points. but takes on a different angle when it comes to storytelling. So this angle is very much linked to the role of the platform itself. It's linked to the best practice of this platform, be it whether we should exist in long form or short term videos, etc. And it's also linked, firstly and most importantly, to the role of consumer or the consumer behavior on that platform itself. So this is cross-platform as we know it. Back then, we can in a way say that cross-platform hasn't changed significantly from 10 years ago till now. So what has changed, so the definition still stands true in a sense that, yes, we are looking at multiple touch points to convey a certain message. But what has changed significantly is number one, the proliferation of certain platforms and the growth of these platforms, the role these platform plays, and the roles of the consumers within this platform itself. So it's the environment in a way has become much, much more complex. But the definition of what cross-platform is still, in essence, utilization of different content across different platforms with a different story to spin, but all under one organizational message, which is consistent.
Interesting. How, if I could sort of dash over to you, Richard, do you agree? Do you say that would you say that the cross-platform is the same as it was 5-10 years ago?
I agree with some of the points Maya mentioned, but obviously we can't ignore the fact that there are certain things that have evolved and changed during that period of time. If we look at the audience example, someone who was 11 or 12 years old 10 years ago is now in their early 20s. They've entered the workforce. They have certain amount of purchasing power. Their behaviors are completely different to someone who is now in their early 30s. So audience is one thing I think that has evolved over that time. Another big area I think where we've seen change is technology and digital, which are sort of bucketed together. 10 years ago, again, you look at the marketing mix, platforms such as TikTok and Snapchat and others weren't part of the ecosystem back then. We've seen mobile grow significantly. We've seen technologies such as 5G impact the way we can also distribute and consume content. Programmatic is another part of the ecosystem that has continued to evolve. So there's been a lot of advancements there as well. Measurement, I would touch on as another subject. And although there are a lot of challenges, and I think we will probably touch upon them later on in the conversation.
I feel we may.
There are, of course, no advancements from 10 years ago till today. Again, pretty much any brand that's spending across platforms today has some sort of econometrics modeling, market mix modeling, are doing brand lifts, focus groups, whatever it may be to better understand their customers and the ROI of their investments. The last thing I'd probably mention, which is more true from a sort of a broadcaster or publisher standpoint, is the production quality itself. Whereas our region was much more heavily reliant on the West, on Hollywood, on markets such as Turkey, for the really top quality content and shows. We've slowly seen, an uplift in the quality from the MENA region and markets like Saudi Arabia. So with NBC Studios, for example, we recently also launched a Shahid original, which is called Rashash, doing extremely well. If you haven't seen it, I urge you to go check it out. And
that's a film or a TV or a show or a series, but a drama series, a dramatic.
Yeah, and we can confidently say that the quality of that production is on par with what you would expect with the global giants such as Netflix and so on. So there's been an uplift in terms of the quality of content coming out of our region, not just as a broadcaster, but also in terms of brands and the content that they're putting out on specific platforms.
And what platforms does MMS offer, or NBC, as you're the commercial arm, you represent NBC. Can you sort of list off the different platforms that if I came to you and I said I want you to put my brand out there, what platforms what outlets can you offer me? What do you have? You've got Shahid, you mentioned, which is the which is the streaming platform. You've got NBC's sort of regular channels. What else have you got?
Well, basically, we are everywhere. I think wherever you find an audience, you'd find NBC in some form throughout the ecosystem. I can give you an example of an upcoming, shows or platforms that we have to kind of bring that to life. We are very excited about a new production. One of the biggest shows that we've actually done, which will be launching next month, which is House of Talent.
I've heard about this, yeah.
Yeah, so House of Talent, to try to summarize it, is it's kind of like a talent show similar to The Voice, crossed with reality show like Big Brother or Star Academy, with a little bit of The Apprentice kind of mixed in as well. And what I mean by that is it's not just determined by judges deciding who wins the show or just votes by the public. There's actual business performance KPIs that are built into the program itself. So the contestants need to sell tickets to concerts, they need to drive up their streams across platforms, they need to grow their social footprint, etc.
So what sort of platforms would you find this on? I mean, you already sort of hinted at some of them just then.
Yeah, so
but yeah.
So basically, there will be a live concert every week from Riyadh season, and that concert is broadcast on NBC One. It's also broadcast on NBC Sank, Masr, Iraq, basically covering everything from North Africa across the MENA region. In addition to that, the contestants themselves will be living inside a house in Riyadh, hence the name House of Talent, where that's the reality TV aspect of it. That will be live streamed on Shahid. People can log in at any point in time, see what the contestants are doing on a daily basis, the training they're doing and how they're spending their days. We will also be creating cut downs of that, which we're calling the dailies, that will be broadcast daily on NBC4, 30 to 45 minute sort of summary of what happened during the day. Then there are radio extensions, since it's a music show, it naturally fits on radio as a platform. There'll be activations on streaming platforms, and it's actually on ground as well. And then bringing it all together, we have that social media ecosystem, the machinery that works around everything to drive viewership and engagement. So to summarize it, it's on TV, it's on ground, it's on social media, it's on digital video on demand, streaming platforms, social media, you name it. So wherever the audience is, we're there, and we try to organically adapt the content we have based on the audience and the nature of those platforms.
Great. So that's the media side of things. Let's turn now to the client side of things. And Toby, you mentioned that Delivery Hero is behind the sort of food delivery giants Talabat and Hunger Station in the region. And do you want to just tell us a little bit more about what you do and sort of who you're trying to speak to and what platforms you use for that? Would you use all the platform, presumably all the platforms that Rich was talking about, some of the platforms that Rich was talking about, other platforms that that are out with the MMS thing? Yeah, what's your sort of who are you and what do you do?
So as we touched on in the beginning, Delivery Hero is a worldwide family of food delivery brands with the largest food delivery network outside of China, active in 50 markets across 4 continents. As you can probably imagine, with the subject of food delivery, it's a very broad audience because everybody has to eat. And also on top of that, we're broadening the scope in recent months, and this will be a big part of our strategy moving forward, to include not only fast food delivery, but also Q-commerce delivery, so same day, 20-minute delivery, and grocery deliveries, ever increasing the opportunities and the occasions throughout the day that someone will have a chance to interact with a Delivery Hero consumer brand. So given our very broad product appeal, you can imagine that we don't have one target audience. We have many target audiences, but each one of those will have their own objectives. So for people who are already customers, we might want to look at increasing their order frequency. Perhaps if they're an older client, we may want to get them more comfortable ordering through an app compared to a phone. And naturally, when we're talking about cross-platform, we attempt to tailor the message to the medium and the audience that we're trying to talk to. Touching on what Richard said with NBC, it's very interesting, our partnership with them with something like House of Talent, because as he says, the life of the media extends so far beyond just airing on TV. With some of the developments in the past 10 years we talked about in the intro, now it has such a long half-life after the airing to include social media content, which is cut down for YouTube or social channels. And so, yeah, I wouldn't say that any one medium, any one channel is off limits. We have used, as well as traditional things like TV and out of home, new mediums like connected TV, video on demand, esports. We're working with influencers quite a lot. So yeah, nothing is off limits.
There's nothing that you wouldn't advertise on.
No, and it makes it a very interesting employer to work for as well, because if you come with any idea, it could be something pretty crazy. It's ready for a test.
So going back to Richard, when people are putting things together sort of across platforms, should the marketing content, should the advertising itself fall into line with, you were talking about how you'll have sort of cut down versions of the show, and you'll have sort of more I guess sort of musical versions and things. How much should sort of marketing content around that, how much should the advertising around that mimic or sort of stick to the same format and echo the publisher's content?
Well, I think, as a general rule, all content, whether that's, a drama series or an ad, should be adapted to the platform that it lives on and the audience behavior on that platform. So that's the general rule, I think, that most marketers or brands should adopt. If we take a look at the nature of storytelling, it's different across platforms. So if you look at TV as an example, it follows a more traditional plot and flow of storytelling. There's a beginning, there's a middle, there's an end. It starts with an introduction, then there's rising action that leads to the climax, which is generally towards the end of the story, whether it's a drama or an ad, as I mentioned, then the conclusion. But things are very different on digital. On digital, you need to keep in mind, based on the platforms, how are the audience behaving? What's their attention span? We live in an era of skipping and swiping, etc. So it's much more important to grab the audience at the beginning to maintain their engagement and their relationship with the content, whether it's a show or an ad for that matter. So you often see brands actually put that climax or big moment towards the beginning of that piece of content, just to make sure that whoever happens to scroll through it is captured by that moment and then is kept to kind of, continue on with the journey. So I do think, yes, you should more or less follow and adapt following the content based on the platform and the audience behavior accordingly.
Okay, and I'm going to sort of push that back to Maya then, and ask you whether you find then that the content, how sort of prescriptive you find that is, that when you're producing content for different platforms, do you or when you're working with creative agencies and planning the content for different platforms, does it do you sort of have to stick to, on digital, does the cell have to be within the first couple of seconds and so on, or do you have more sort of freedom around that? In other words, how much are your hands tied by the nature of where you're putting the content?
Well, to a certain extent, or to a big extent, we're definitely tied by the consumer behavior on the platform itself. Whether they want to be inspired, whether they want to be informed, whether they want to, have small snippets, behind the scenes, etc. So definitely the nature of the platform itself will dictate how we as brands want to behave. But if I go back to your original question, which is, do we as brands extend the publisher messages, or do we as brands bank on our own marketing messages? Then
yep.
In a way, this takes a different spin, and I'm taking it back to that because we get asked a lot by our clients. So we get asked a lot by our clients in a sense that what should I do? If I sponsor a big format such as House of Talent, what do I do? Do I integrate within the show itself? Do I produce content and brand assets that carry forward the message of that format? Or do I rely on my brand assets and my umbrella branding to push this through? So
what do you tell them?
Yeah, so going back to that, it all depends on what your objective is technically. So if you are moving towards a high reach strategy, and if the purpose behind sponsoring or aligning yourself with a certain program is linked directly to reach and reach alone, then automatically your brand assets should prevail. And automatically the association with the show is not as necessary as the reach garnered from that show. But when you're looking at it from a perspective of, I want to locally connect with consumers within that interest, I want to build further association, then automatically the choice of the show itself should mirror what the brand DNA is, should mirror what the purpose of the brand is. And in a way, the brand will add utility to the show. So that way, integration and a brand partnerships makes so much sense. And creating your content that is an extension of the show itself makes so much sense and will add so much more benefit to the brand itself.
Toby, that makes a lot of sense, but it seems that it must mean that an awful lot of your time is spent sort of planning how different content will work for the different brand goals that you have, whether it's, and where in the funnel you're looking and so on. How do you cope with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think exactly as Maya touched on there, you always have to keep in mind the overall objectives, because a similar partnership can work very differently in two different markets. If I give an example, in the MENA region, some of our brands have been present for 20 years up to. And so at this point, simply communicating with our brand assets, it's not going to be enough to convince someone to become a consumer if they aren't already, because
they've had 20 years to make that decision. They're not going to,
they're probably familiar with it. So at that point, it becomes more of a question of how do we either change behavior at a fundamental level to make them a consumer, to change either ordering groceries online when perhaps someone never ordered groceries online, or to create more of an emotional connection to the brand beyond just communicating the USPs. And sponsorships, because a lot of these shows people can build an emotional connection to, and you can kind of bypass the rational part of their brain and associate your brand with that. So in certain markets, that's meant with cooking shows, having the ingredients delivered by a delivery hero brand, and then the challenge they're making is, for example, a dish that's a local cuisine. So we're immediately associating the brand with that occasion to order, and also this kind of positive emotional association of this local dish. So every case is different. I think if you keep in mind your objectives and your consumer, you can't go far wrong. But at the same time, I do want to kind of demystify that it can maybe seem intimidating getting going. But at the end of the day, all you have to think about is who is a consumer and at what point in their day will they interact with this media and for how long. So as I talked about, partnerships or sponsorships, they have a long half-life. On TV, you might be able to use a longer format that might be able to communicate a more complex brand message or proposition. But then when we're going to switch to something like TikTok or Snapchat or anything like that, naturally we're going to drill it down to the juiciest bits, because you can do whatever you want, but you may just end up throwing money away if you put in a very text heavy slow ad on TikTok, because people will just scroll straight past. By having this kind of holistic approach, which is adapted to the consumer, who they are and where they are in their day, in the end, you're going to be less intrusive and less annoying to them. And also you're going to have more effective and more efficient campaigns.
Great. So, so it sounds like the sort of the planning and the working out sort of how you're addressing each angle is one of the sort of the obviously quite key to this. What's the current sort of challenges, and are they changing in terms of cross-platform marketing? Could Richard, sort of off the top of your head, what's one of the challenges?
cost of entry is a challenge and something we hear about quite often. Although it may be slightly exaggerated in the market, you don't necessarily need $500,000 to $1 million to be able to properly deploy.
How much would you need it? If I was like, what's a sort of good entry level sort of cost to get something going on more than one?
I don't necessarily know that there's a specific number, but you don't need $500,000 to $1 million. But realistically, you can't be across TV and digital and outdoor and radio with $20,000 either. It does come down to the audience. I think we've spoken about that quite a bit. Where is your audience? If you have a niche audience, then you really need to identify where are they spending time. And then in that scenario, maybe cross-platform actually isn't the best solution for your brand. But there is the reality of cost of entry being a struggle, especially for the smaller businesses or SMEs that might not have the same level of investment as multinationals or big local brands as well. So I think that's definitely something that comes up quite often in our industry.
Toby, you are not a small startup, so cost of entry, I'd imagine, would not be a challenge for you. What are the challenges that that sort of a major operator sees?
Yeah, so I think we talked about this a little bit in the beginning, but measurement is a big challenge when it comes to combining different offline channels and then online channels, for example. There's still very limited opportunities for us to really evaluate, for example, what's the incremental reach brought by combining a video on demand service with linear TV or connected TV service. What's the incremental benefit bought with out of home on top of that? I mean, these are very old questions, and there's more and more technological advancements, but a lot of the core challenges still remain on that. Even down to things like certain video demand platforms not being able to offer impression tracking. So it's only through clicks that we're able to track, where, you know, if you're watching something on your phone, for example, on a video on demand platform, you might not be exactly in that moment ready to convert, or you may be watching on your laptop and you order through your phone. So this kind of cross-device tracking can be a challenge. And also
sounds like it's getting even harder, rather than you know, technology maybe catching some things up, but technology also adds more things to track.
Yeah, we end up with a lot of partners, a lot of tracking solutions, and then everything trying to bring it into one place to combine it and make sense of it. Kind of snowballs into a bigger and bigger challenge.
And so Maya, you you see this across a lot of different brands, not just Delivery Hero. So, you know, is this a common complaint, measurement? I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that it may well be.
I think it's the common, challenge that every single marketer is facing, every single agency is facing, and every single publisher is facing. We try to justify, why should I invest X dollar behind something versus something else? And in the age of accountability, driven even more so by the reality of COVID, everyone is out to understand the value of their book, very simply. And not only that, it's about understanding, why should I invest so much money behind one platform, let's say, versus following an agile, multi-occasion strategy, and always on strategy built on the various trends of consumers, because consumers in general are agile in their nature. There are so many micro trends coming up, every single day. So as an advertiser, do I focus on these micro trends, or do I focus on big formats that will, garner my reach at the end of the day? But as well, if I go fully towards a micro strategy, then am I missing out? If I go fully towards digital and forget about TV and outdoor, am I missing out? So these are honestly questions that are plaguing us all the time. And we not only need to think about just the short run, but we should also think about the long term. So if I'm looking at, immediate effectiveness and efficiency is great. I see that immediate impact from a cross-platform, let's say, activation. But then was it the right strategy for the long term for me? And this is where the value of not only measurement, but continuous measurement linked to a test and learn agenda is critical over a long period of time to start to identify what type of strategies work best for me as a brand and what type of activations work best for me.
I think we've got technologies like people meters coming in. You know, and that's been a sort of talk for a long time, but I know that in Saudi, they're really sort of progressing at a pace that we haven't seen for a long time. So I think we're really going to see that. Is that not going to help? Or can people meters only measure TV? I know that they can sort of measure other things. Is that something they can do, Maya?
Well, more of a question to Richard, but
okay, fair enough.
Yeah, I don't think people meters could definitely measure cross-platform, but there is a certain extent to which you can measure VOD linked to TV. Correct me if I'm wrong, Richard.
Yeah, I think people meters is more of an uplift or an improvement in terms of how we measure TV and connected TVs, as opposed to the whole cross-platform situation. And that kind of comes back to the root of the issue that we have today. When you look at individual touch points, they each already have their own challenges. So then trying to overcome those challenges, but connect them all together and have that single view of a customer across platforms is the bigger issue. So while TV does lag behind some of the other regions today, and people meters will definitely help us get more metrics and looking at those metrics and be able to try do more comparisons with digital, it also adds to some of the problems that we have. Today, the entire supply chain, when you look at media, is based on non-transparent walled gardens. So the other issue that we have is that there is no unified kind of consistent standard of measurement. What is it when we say one view? How is that view actually being calculated? What is the criteria that is being taken into account? Because it's looked at differently across platforms. How are they calculating things like impressions? So that's also at the root of the issue, that each kind of platform has its own issues and they're not really connecting and talking to each other consistently. So
I see.
Yeah, it seems like it's all doom and gloom, and I could see measurement taking up the entire time of the panel, because it is one of the most important questions to what Maya and Toby, to echo what they said earlier. All marketers, everyone is trying to find that right way or as accurate as possible to measure the outcome.
Well, I did see Toby nodding in agreement there. So Toby, what sort of metrics do you use to compare apples and oranges, to compare, I don't know, digital platforms with TV and so on?
Yeah. I mean, one of the big challenges, of course, is if you do try to bring them onto a same even playing field. For example, if you try and look at CPM or focus on efficiency metrics, it can lead you down the wrong path. So, for example, if you were going to compare the CPM of some of these like OTT or CTV services, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be significantly more higher than TV in terms of CPM. So on efficiency alone, you would never choose it. However, if we put all of our money on TV because it's the cheapest platform, inevitably we're going to plateau or decline because there's only so many people there that we can reach, and reaching them over and over again in the same place isn't going to lead to growth. Same if we compared only on CPAs, because these top of mind channels like TV, like out of home, bring a lot of value in the mid to long term. If we're looking at short term conversions, then we would see a big discrepancy maybe versus other tracked channels. So the question that we start with as an advertiser is really how will incorporating this channel complement the existing mix? We start with specific use cases. So we usually use TV and out of home as the basis for most campaigns because they're, for a broad product as ours, they're unbeaten in building reach and frequency quickly and efficiently. But then on top of that, if we say we've identified an opportunity to grow our business with young males aged 18 to 25, we could look at adding esports or increasing our presence on certain streaming services or focusing on specific sporting events. to complement what we already have in our mix. As Richard said, it is all relying on walled gardens, and then we're relying a lot on like vendor research or third-party research from people like Ipsos, and also the research carried out by our brand team. So there is no silver bullet that we could easily point to, like a single metric, but we have to take this holistic view of who our consumer is and where we can meet them.
So it seems to be sort of largely judged on sort of on the sort of the end rather than you're not judging the means as much as the ends, and sort of making sure that you speak to the people in the right place, even if you can't sort of compare how well that's doing. While we're now, again, we could go down the measurement rabbit hole, and I'm happy to come back and do this for another webinar or 10, because I think it's one of the most crucial points, and one that we could, one that comes up all the time in the industry. But let's move on just before we wrap up to technology. And I was wanting to just ask Maya, we've looked at some of the measurement technology. What other sort of technologies are around that are available now and that could be sort of helping develop cross-platform marketing and the measurement of it into the future?
So from a tool perspective, we, like Richard said, that definitely cross-market content has become more complex. But at the end of the day, while it has become more complex, there are tools that make it a bit simpler. And those are the dynamic creative optimization tools that allow us to target, the consumers, the right consumers with the right message and right content. It allows us to produce content at scale, be it in the past, we used to manually create thousands of pieces of content. Currently, this is all done, in a shorter period of time. Similarly, there are certain creator marketplaces that allow us, rather than manually pick certain advocates or certain influencers, they allow us, to minimize that journey. So there are some technologies that have helped make our lives better. And similarly, when you look at it from a measurement perspective, there are tools and analytic exercises that are being done to enable us to measure cross-platform on a holistic level. So this is where we look at multi-brand lift studies, which allows to understand brand lifts across different platforms and what's contributing most. But as well, this is where we as an agency look at full funnel modeling. And full funnel modeling not only allows us to understand the impact of cross-platform on sales itself, but it allows us to understand the impact of different KPIs onto each other and how they impact the brand in the long term. So there are many solutions on that level, but as well, there should be a readiness to embrace, and there should be a readiness to plan ahead prior to the activation itself, which is something we sometimes lack in terms of readiness on that level.
Presumably, though, would I be right in thinking that it's sort of because of the cost of the technologies out there, that it's normally sort of agencies leading this because you can spread the cost across your different brands, or are brands sort of doing this in-house and things, or is it coming from, and some of it will be coming from the media themselves? Toby, what's your sort of strategy there? Oh, sorry, if I can steal the
I got too excited.
mic from you. Go ahead. No. Start. You start, and then I'll go to Toby. Yeah. What would your answer to that be?
No, please, Toby, go ahead.
No problem. Yeah, exactly as you say, there is a barrier in this, in first of all, securing and licensing the technology, and then also in terms of setup, in collecting, supplying enough data. There is a certain amount of time and effort involved in that. So at Delivery Hero, we're often working on our own solutions in-house, because the benefit is are a great partner to us in MENA, but we also have different agencies all around the world. Whereas if we can develop a tool in-house, then we can share that benefit to each of our consumer brands around the world. So it's something that we would normally work on ourselves.
That's completely not the answer I was expecting. Is that Maya? Is that typical of your clients? Are the bigger clients taking sort of some of the technology in-house?
Definitely. many mature clients are actually looking towards taking this in-house for sure. But then the value that we can offer as well is in aiding them on the methodology, helping them collect the right data points, identifying the right signals, filtering through this data itself, to understand how do we unify it across the board. So there's also this partnership that we take in terms of building it and analyzing it together, and together coming up with the right strategies for brands. And this is when it comes to brand partnerships on those who take it in-house. But as well, I believe everyone within our ecosystem is actually looking at measurement, and even within walled garden themselves, they're looking at measurements as well, and how can they add more value to justify investments within those platforms themselves. So across the board, we're all thinking the same thoughts. And yes, as agencies, we do facilitate this more and more, and we do provide more attainable solutions for our clients.
It definitely seems to be a sort of a partnership sort of between the brands and the clients and the agencies. And I guess it couldn't be any other way when you're looking at so many moving parts. Now, we're out of time, I'm afraid, for this panel, but I would like to just sort of end with, I always like to end on a sort of piece of practical advice. So if I could ask each of you to come up with one sort of piece of practical advice that would help make my imaginary brand's cross-platform strategy better. And I think, Richard, if I were a brand, Austin Inc., coming, asking you for advice on cross-platform strategy, what would you tell me?
I think the first thing that we need to highlight is there is no one size fits all solution. There's no ideal cross-platform strategy that you can just lift and shift and adopt to different industries and clients. The starting point for the advice I give you is you should always start with two things, which is number one, who is your audience? How do they behave? Where are they spending their time? How they interact with media? And on the other hand, what are your brand KPIs? What are your objectives? What are you trying to achieve? And let those two work together and guide you in terms of your cross-platform strategy. If you start the other way around and start by thinking of TV or outdoor or Instagram, it's not going to be, a connected story across platform that helps grow your business. So that would be the main advice I would give. And then despite, all the challenges we've talked about when it comes to measurement, you do need to keep measurement in mind and try to identify what is the best way to understand the effectiveness and ROI of my investments, and not just in the short term, but in the medium to long term as well.
Brilliant. Maya, what would your advice be for someone looking to sort of expand their marketing into a more cross-brand strategy?
Definitely echo what Richard just said. So first and foremost, understand the why. Why are we doing something? Then definitely build your measurement ecosystem. Make sure you're ready to measure the impact of a cross-platform activation. And finally, definitely balance the short and long term, because what you do today will definitely impact tomorrow. And this is what we need to plan for.
And finally, Toby, from a brand point of view, you're not just giving advice, you're living this. What would your advice to me be?
Yeah, I think this is also building on what both Richard and Maya said, but start from a point of understanding your consumer, who they are, where they are, how do they move through the city, what does their day look like, and then fit the channels around that. Don't try and work backwards from which channels you want to air on, but figure out how you can reach them with a relevant touch point throughout their day. And as I say, that will make it less intrusive and ultimately more effective.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. I think there's some really sort of great points there. My sort of two big takeaways are that if you're looking at sort of reaching people across multiple platforms, think about the people before you think of the platforms. And also that if any marketer out there has one wish, it would be to get better measurement systems in place. So But thanks a million for that. I think you guys are all fairly easy to find across sort of social media and so on. And you know, I hope that other people will start sort of taking this conversation forward. So I'd like to thank Richard Addington from NBC Media Solutions, MMS. I'd like to thank Maya Abu Ajram, who's the Deputy GM at UAE, and Toby Jazard, who is the Senior Offline Marketing Manager at Delivery Hero. So thank you very much indeed. That was a phenomenally interesting conversation. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Austin.
Now we're going to be going to our second panel called Doing It Right, Cross-Platform Best Practice. I'm pretty excited about this because it's an absolutely brand new format. This also means that part of this format is going to involve me trying to play a video, so good luck with that to me. So what I think what you're going to see if you stick around now is you're going to see a big campaign. I've been careful that it's an international campaign, so we're not going to be insulted, so we're not going to have any creatives taking out hits on us. It's going to be dissected from all sides, and there's going to be a lot of practical advice from a really superb panel. So I'd like to introduce that panel right now. If I could introduce our moderator, who is known to an awful lot of students and a lot of professionals here, and that is Dina Faur, who is the Professor of Advertising at the American University in Dubai. Hi, Dina.
Hi, Austin. Thank you for having me.
And Dina will be joined with an amazing panel that is made up of Paul Bannon, who is MullenLowe MENA's Regional Executive Creative Director. Hey, Paul, how are you?
Very well. Good to be here.
So we've got a creative. We've got a platform, which is represented by Fahad Osman, who is the Regional Director of Global Business Marketing Meta at TikTok and ByteDance. I was when we did a test call earlier, you'll notice that in the background of Fahad's office, there's a campaign cover. So I agreed that I would get my TikTok mug out, and there you go. Bit of cross-platform endorsement there. and finally, from a brand point of view, we are joined by none other than Amy Peters, who is the Group Head of Marketing and Communications at Mashreq Bank. Hi, Amy.
Hello, thank you for having me.
So I'm going to switch myself off and hand over to Dina. So at one point, Dina's going to ask me to play a video, so I may flicker back on, but I'm going to certainly stay on mute unless I have to apologize and make excuses for myself. So I'll which would not be the first time, believe me. But I'll hand over to Dina and stick around, chaps. This is going to be a really interesting panel. Okay, over to you, Dina.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Good afternoon for everyone, and thank you, my guests. This is exciting. It's always interesting to have a discussion outside the classroom, and especially with the industry and with professionals as yourselves, to see what's happening in the world. Talking about best practice is what we do every day as professors, and what we try to push for all the time. And the only way and the best way actually to do this is to actually learn in retrospect. So we see work that has worked, work that was successful, that was impactful, and we try to find out what are the lessons we can learn. And this is basically what we are doing here today. It's very interesting to see the agency, the client, and the platform, and to see if we can really come up with a set of maybe recommendations on how to do this. What is best practice if we want to generate a solid integrated cross-platform campaign? But before that, how would you define a successful cross-platform campaign? If you can answer that, and then we will have the video to see. So who would like to start? What makes it successful, you think?
There's a number of different ways to look at cross-platform campaign success. The first one, I think, would be, am I getting similar results across all the platforms? There's not a massive disparity in the success on one platform in terms of the numerical ROI versus on another. That means you've thought through what you need to be doing on each platform, and you're planning to succeed on each one, as opposed to, well, taking an asset, taking a campaign, and force fitting it onto your non-primary platforms.
Thank you. Paul?
Hi there, everyone. From my perspective, we always look at it a little differently. I mean, I think there was a lot of good conversation that I heard on the end of the previous call from this sort of point of view in this question too. But generally speaking, we look to find the channels that are going to perform the best for us. We don't necessarily set out with a predetermined list of sort of channels from a marketing or an advertising perspective, and really we look, to find the ideas that are going to create transformational sort of gains for brands and really create an unfair share of attention for them, and sort of cut through and sort of knock on the doors of our target audience and capture their attention. So I think they were discussing this in the previous meeting. There is no one size fits all sort of approach from an integrated perspective, but I think it's about finding the right channels that are going to do the right things at the right time for the campaign, brand, or the idea that you're trying to translate and get across to people.
Thanks. Yeah, that's fair enough. Amy?
The only thing I think I differ with there in terms of a one size fits all is actually the importance of having everyone in the room at the start. And I think I'm sort of not really disagreeing, I suppose, slightly just sort of changing tack there. But I think for an integrated campaign, it is important to set out our audience centric and platform agnostic. But actually really make sure that you do have loads of different voices in the room. So you have your PR specialists, you have your, social, all of these different types of expertise, and hopefully some surprising and, challenging points of view as well. And I think that's sometimes where you get the most, creative ideas, is when you might have a sort of intern from the product team and whatever, actually just giving you a bit of a new insight and a new version of what might be happening and where you can start. But I think that sort of kickoff point and that multiple voices at the beginning is a really key part of the success of integrated campaigns.
Thank you. Okay, so far we're talking about the actual integration of everyone or all team members from the start. The way we want to measure is looking at similar performance across platforms to see how effective was it, and also from Paul's input, it is about how cut through was the campaign. How much did it serve the brand? How much did it relate to the audience? And how creative was it? Am I right?
Yeah, I like the unfair advantage. I'm all over that.
Okay, Mr. Austin, let's have a look at our campaign. We chose an example that we can look at just to use as reference. There are so many beautiful campaigns out there that we can also refer to.
Here's the problem with Cheetos. They're messy. The Cheeto dust gets on your hands and it gets all over everything. It's like glitter, but delicious.
People love everything about Cheetos, but they have a complicated relationship with this.
Cheeto fingers?
Huh? Which was a problem, considering our new product is the messiest, cheesiest, dustiest popcorn ever. So how do you turn this into something everyone loves? First, we got people talking about the most controversial part of our product by starting a conversation about its official name.
This is not called Cheetos Dust. It's called Cheeto.
With a single tweet, Cheeto started showing up everywhere.
Cheeto has revealed the original name of the orange dust.
Cheeto.
Cheeto?
Cheeto.
Cheeto.
My hands have Cheeto on them.
But there's no hiding the Cheeto.
Its new dictionary definition was viewed in 110 countries worldwide. One guy tattooed it on his hands. We even revealed that it played a hand in changing music history forever.
Wait,
I can't touch this.
Just as Cheetle mania hit an all-time high, we announced that our latest product was completely covered in it.
Cheetle needs popcorn.
With a digital, social, and out-of-home campaign, finger-painted with real Cheetle, of course, it all culminated with a Super Bowl commercial that gave people the ultimate excuse to get out of the things they didn't want to do, thanks to Cheetle.
Can't touch this.
Which was music to their ears.
How did this not happen earlier?
Yes.
And they're like, can't touch this. And I was like dying at it.
I was thinking about the cheesy hands.
In the end, we turned a product attribute people find annoying into a product launch they simply couldn't get enough of.
Stop. Hammer time.
So what do we think? Do you think this was a good example of a cross-platform campaign that seems to have taken a life on its own, introducing a new attribute that has now become a sub-brand by Cheetos? What do you think, Paul?
I love this campaign. Obviously, fully aware of it and seeing it. I think it's connecting and joining all the dots very, very, very cleverly. It's great use of sort of fantastic use of music, great use of celebrity, smart use of social. I think what it's doing very well is using all the channels to their strengths. And I love the fact that they've taken what is sort of potentially a negative for the brand and flipped it into a positive. I think the best example I've ever seen of that, and it still stands true to this day, is Marmite. When you have a brand that's talking about, you either love it or you hate it. And I think that was such a brave thing for a brand to do. This has similar sort of hallmarks in terms of it, maybe not quite as brave, but still very, very sort of beautifully put together. I think, if I'm honest, there's a little bit of creative storytelling in the case study. I'm not quite sure how much out of home is done with painting with your fingers. You might find that's actually on the side of the advertising agency, or maybe the guy that tattooed it. Maybe he was just trying to make a name for himself inside the agency. I'm not sure. Maybe I'm being a little unfair, but it's a very well put together case study. But at the heart of it, the idea is fantastic. It's seamless. They're using all the channels really well, connecting all the dots together beautifully. So yeah, I think it's great.
Excellent, thank you. What do you think, Fahad?
I'm personally hungry. Right? Every time I watch that case, I'm a massive fan of Cheetos, and oh dear God, why?
That was my start. Please go on. I'm listening.
Can I have 3 minutes to Insta shop something? So I thought the approach was fantastic. Looking at the insights that people who eat Cheetos are marked by it, okay, and some of them are annoyed by it, and turning that into a positive, as Paul said. I do feel that they missed a massive trick, though. Given how popular, how mainstream the brand is, I thought there was a lot of scope for user-generated content, inviting people more deliberately to participate in the thing, in the campaign, showing them how they would use Cheetle to get out of things that they didn't want to do. So like the idea they had, but they could have created a real wave with it. Okay, I think that is the one trick that they might have missed in terms of making this truly cross-platform.
Amy, do you think clients hesitate when it comes to user-generated content? Do they think, it's not a safe bet? What happens?
Yeah, no, 100%. I think there are an awful lot of ideas that never see the light of day because they can't quite stand the test of the what if, which is a terrible shame, and we all must be braver and get better at that. But I'd love to hear other people's thoughts on whether we really think this is very well targeted at its key audience. And I was sort of having a look through it. And I think it's interesting that if you sort of track it back from your Super Bowl and you think about, your Mila and Ashton usage, it's, dare I say it, a little bit old school. It's a little bit classic. And I think this kind of plays into what Fahad is saying, in that I don't know that they've really thought about, new channels and different ways of reaching a wider audience. It's a very it's a lovely PR campaign that drove a huge amount of earned media, and the earned media drew coverage at the Super Bowl, right? So tick, 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 happy days. You know, they got way more coverage than their one slot in 50 at Super Bowl. Great. But actually, I don't know, I was doing a bit of sort of poking around. I saw quite a lot of limited engagement and quite sort of snarky messages on some of the social channels of people just going, nah, you can't do this. Sorry, it's Cheeto dust. And, you know, so how much did it really become a thing? Or is it just a beautiful case study, as Paul said? And I'm not a Cheetos fan, so, you know, maybe this is like coloring. See what I did there? My point of view. Sorry. Bad pun day.
It is quite coloring. What do you think, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I do agree with the points. Actually, it's not. I don't think it's breaking any boundaries, being transformational or sort of purely disruptive in trying to find a new way to do things. I think it's doing all the old things very well and putting them all together, you know, into a sort of, you know, very hardworking, solid sort of campaign with a good idea behind it. Is it the sort of stuff that's going to make everybody sit up and take note? No, I just think it's highly professional in the way it's done. And it, you know, look at the agency that put it together. They've been doing world-class work for decades. So, you know, it's the kind of great quality work you'd expect from the likes of a good bee.
Safe quality work.
Well, award-winning safe quality work.
Award-winning safe quality work. Yes, absolutely. Do you think this is what we should be looking at, or how much risk can we afford to take?
As much as possible.
Depends who you want to talk to.
Exactly. Okay, and it depends on the client, how brave they are as well. Right.
Absolutely.
Okay, so it's this complicated relationship also between content and medium, and when you have several mediums or a cross-platform, it becomes even more complicated. You have to understand your audiences and the specificity of each medium. How flexible should a medium be, or a platform be, Mr. Fahad? And does this mean you find yourselves creating content for your platform? How does this affect the cost and the ROI and all of that?
I think there's a bit of a fallacy in talking about cost as a driver of platform selection, right? When you talk about a cross-platform campaign, you identify the objective and you identify the platforms that will help you get to that objective, right? Some of it might be reach to a specific audience, some of it might be, you know, immersion, some of it might be engagement. So once you've defined that, it's a simple matter of understanding how to achieve that particular objective on the platform. I don't think there's any dearth of content and information around how to do that. So if anyone's not doing that, it's laziness, okay? And in the information that you can find online, there's always content around how to effectively, cost-effectively produce content for that genre, okay? I think in a lot of cases, marketers, myself included, we've become accustomed to doing something once, calling it a master visual, and then trying to disseminate it across the entirety of the media ecosystem. Right. The impact that can be had by dividing your attention, okay, working a little bit deeper, a little bit harder, informing yourself a little bit better, out of specific media channels, because the content is relevant, it is particular to that media, and it will elicit the type of response that you're looking for, as opposed to a more content spray and pray approach, outweighs any additional cost multiple times over. You run one campaign, okay, might be for the cost of a campaign and a half, might be for the cost of two, but you'll get 3 times the results. That's a fervent belief that I have.
What do you think, Paul?
No, I mean, look, agree. I mean, I think there's, sorry, I should probably close my door. My team is being noisy in the background. The way that we, what I like to do, or the way that we like to think, is that I effectively start everything that we're working on from the same point of view, and that's that no one cares about what we're creating. Like, no one sets out to read ads. People effectively read what interests them, and sometimes that happens to be marketing or advertising. So I think if you keep, personally, we try and keep that in mind, and we always try and we don't try and win awards. We don't try and go after just sort of getting fame for fame's sake. What we try and do is create something from just start from something simple that's going to be interesting. And if you can create something that's interesting, then I think that you're going to be halfway there. But it's we always try and compose an ad from its weakest point, which is effectively that 9 times out of 10, no one's going to care about reading it. So if you can overcome that, keep that in your head all the time, then sometimes you achieve what you set out to do by creating what is the simple idea that captures the imagination of hundreds of countries around the world. That's the holy grail, right?
So why do we have campaigns, Amy, that are maybe super safe, maybe, as Fahad says, lazy? It feels lazy, like you have one key visual that keeps repeating everywhere, and it feels like too safe, maybe not creative enough. How do we, but the client is happy with it. How do we try to, or maybe the client has approved it, it's up on, it's happening. How can we encourage, how can clients improve their process to give us braver, permissions?
Yeah, so the first point is, just because it's out doesn't mean the client's happy. It means they've signed it off. Those are not necessarily the same thing. So I think, any good working relationship has to be one that's built on multiple and regular engagement points and really open discussion, right? Because if you restrict your engagement with your agency to your moment of brief, then you're, I don't think, ever going to get truly cut through ideas and campaigns, because you're basically taking away a lot of the collaboration and discussion and going, okay, right, I'm ready. Here's my XYZ, come and wow me with something amazing. And it's flawed, right? So I think that sort of more open collaboration and wider discussions and, regular engagement is really, really key. I mean, just to go back to kind of what Paul said, I think, trying to create advertising that's not boring is a great, rule of thumb. But I think it's also why stuff like this works, right? Because it sort of shocks people out of their inertia, right? It brings them back into the, oh, okay, now you're interesting me. Now you've got me. You're breaking the mold. But you can't do it every 2 minutes, and you certainly can't. You've got to be doing it in a relevant, authentic, fact-driven way, and you've got to be able to back it up. So that's a little bit of my issue here, where I'm not sure that the case study really carries through to the truth or the consumer angle, is that it feels a little bit like a stunt. And that's great when it works, but really, is it going to have that sort of pull through? And you know what, for a crisp brand, they may not care about pull through. I care about longer term, impacts, because a lot of our accounts are longer term. This is a bag of crisps. So, but I think they probably do care about multiple buying. So, yeah, that's kind of my one question. I'm not sure if I answered your question. I've rambled slightly there, but
we'll come back to it.
Yeah.
I think, my question for you is, for all of you, is, Fahad mentioned it. Do you think the missing link, just think of ourselves as consumers. I just had Cheetos now. I've seen the campaign. We watched Super Bowl. We even spoke about it with my students. I never referred to this dust as Cheetle. It didn't happen. So I agree, it's kind of a very interesting stunt. It's good, it's very well done, but it didn't get stuck. Maybe the missing link was if we had challenged people to show us Would that have worked?
Yeah, and I think, you know, this is what I was talking about before, is this is a beautiful example of old school classic PR. And that's what they've, you know, it was really clear from the case study. If you've got Ellen, if you've got Jenna Bush, if you've got, you know, the Today Show, I mean, all American examples, but it's, you know, some heavy hitting earned PR. That's awesome. And, you know, they got amazing amounts of mentions during the Super Bowl. That's a really, really great campaign. Did it change behavior and drive, you know, ongoing sales of that brand of popcorn? I didn't see, I couldn't find any stats that proved that it did. So, you know, it was a great stunt. Well done.
What do you think, Fahad?
Look, I agree. I do think that this, given the fact that this was a product launch, but a product launch which was rooted in a product attribute that spanned the range, there was so much more that this could have done. This could have had legs, right? So there were, as Amy mentioned, the choice of, you know, the selection of the people involved in the campaign, Ellen and MC Hammer, that to me was a senior client deciding who should, you know, be on the cast and not the target audience. To me, this campaign could have gone, you know what, let's start a debate. Is it Cheetos? Is it Cheetos Dust? I mean, do you remember when Twix came up with the left Twix, right Twix thing? That campaign carried on for ages, and it was so silly, right? Like having a debate between which Twix is better, the left or the right. You could have started a debate between Cheetos Dust and Cheetle, and you would have had two camps arguing with each other over a product attribute naming, right? There could have been so much more to be done that could have carried this product attribute forward, could have created dialogue and discussion. If the intent was to launch a product, I think they did it well. If the intent was to try and create dialogue around the brand, then a lot more could have been done. And I think any brief given to a creative agency or to a platform partner should be that. What more can this be? Right? Because,
What's more can this be? This is interesting. What do you think?
Sorry, my connection was cutting. I think you asked me. Yeah, look, I think we're looking, I think everybody's sort of talking about the same thing to a certain degree. It was a product launch. I think what we spend a lot more time doing, and sort of the brands that I always champion or effectively sort of hold up as best practice, or the ones that are doing it better than everybody else, are the ones that sort of don't take a positioning, they sort of effectively take a position. And the likes of those brands are things like Dove. Nike was another example that we talked about in terms of a case that we were going to show. And I think the brands that stand the test of time are the brands that sort of don't just have another positioning, because millions of brands have that, but they actually take a position and stand for something. That then becomes their purpose, which then allows you to sort of, you know, the product launches can come and go, but the overall brand message stands the test of time. Kit Kat, I often use Index because it's, you know, Have a Break, Have a Kit Kat is 67 years old as a brand line. Dove's Real Beauty is, I don't know, 23, 24, I forget the specifics. You know, but these sort of brand, or MasterCard Priceless, another one, 27 years old, 28 years old. As that platform idea, if you stand for one thing, I think to really sort of gain you know, sort of cut through and sort of consciousness within a consumer's mind, you have to stick to a similar narrative and a similar story over time, one that is perfectly aligned with your sort of beliefs and ideas as a brand, your positioning, your purpose. But then if you stick to that, then like Dove, for example, you know, once every year, once every 2 years, they launch a purpose-based idea. They stand for sort of female empowerment and, you know, change and all of these types of things. But ultimately they sell soap, but they communicate and you know, capture people's attention at a much more powerful level that then becomes part of everyday conversation. So long story short, I think, you know, this is a great sort of product launch. I'm not sure what Cheetos overall brand positioning is. I should have probably looked that up, but the ones that I love are the Kit Kats and the Doves and the Nikes and the like, that effectively really have long-term ambitions in terms of a real sense of belief in terms of how they want to, you know, communicate their brand and differentiate their brand and stand out within a marketplace. So that's my 10 cents.
I should have had lunch before this debate, honestly.
I came prepared.
Blame Austin for not giving us all Cheetos, I think, you know.
We should have approached them, yeah. So okay, how can we, you know, there are a lot of not a lot, but there's a good number of mediocre campaigns out there, maybe that are not really making use of opportunities out there. You know, it's not only laziness, Fahad, it could be also other factors, maybe time, pressure, you know, budgets that are you know, unfair kind of thing. But let's talk about content. How do you see it evolving over, you know, over the last couple of years? Maybe how has it been? How has your work process with developing content, approving content, publishing content, how has it changed, and how do you see it going?
I think the amount of technology that's being made available to people has meant that the reliance on publishers, on search engines dictating what content they should be seeing has diminished substantially. I mean, now every single person, irrespective of where they fit into a particular social group or peer group, can see a different content stream. Their Netflix recommendations are different. What they see in their you know, their content apps is different. The streams are entirely different. Like, we cannot create content that is one size fits all. Like, the ability, as someone on the last panel said, to create DCO style creative for advertising is critical to appeal to a wide niche of people, right? The ability for us as marketers, as advertisers, to say, right, let's now think about this platform and how we can make the best use out of it, okay? And see the specific niches we want to reach and how we can best appeal to them, right? Because everyone now expects to see content which is tailor-made for them. It's not entirely possible. It's not never going to be, you know, something that we can do, but we can try. And I do think, honestly, that it is, yes, time pressures and, you know, stuff like that. But if you do enough work up front, okay, your campaigns should run better. They should be smarter. They should look better, right? If everything is done because, well, we need to launch a product, or everything is done because, well, you know, we need to make sales, the brand essence, the ability for a brand to, you know, find its voice on specific platforms and grow, it's never going to be achieved. We're just going to be left with a whole bunch of, you know, as you said, not great campaigns, tactical campaigns out there that respond to a brief in only the most mediocre way.
What do you guys think? Your views on content and how it is, you know, evolving from a client point of view, from the agency's point of view?
I hate the word because it's honestly, I mean, people, we talk about content, and I think we've gone so far that I'm not sure people really, and I'm not saying this of you, Dina, obviously, but I don't think many people actually stop to think about what that means. And now, kind of as Fahad was saying, it's everything. It's UGC. It's, you know, it is the emails that we send to clients. It is the, you know, it is everything and everywhere. And I think, you know, as a brand custodian, you've got to sort of strip that back, and rather than think about, you know, what's the content, it's what's, you know, what is the idea? What is the point of this? What are we trying to actually stand for? What are we trying, what the behavior that we're trying to drive, to whom? And then we start, and you've got to be multi-platform. You've got to be, you know, thinking, but I think it's having all of those people with the expertise across multiple channels in a room at the start to align that, you know, and agree on that brand idea that drives then where the content flows from. But the word content, I'm so over, sorry.
Yeah, there is an obsession with the word content, and it seems to be going to be long lasting. What do you think, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, you can give it whatever term you want to, but for me, we're only ever after one thing, and that's great thinking, great ideas, great strategy. You know, transformational sort of opportunities that can make brands famous. Like today, you know, I remember doing presentations 15 years ago where I used to talk about the amount of ads that people, or the amount of pieces of communication that people see on a daily basis, and it was like 2,000 or 3,000. Today it's ridiculous. It's like exponentially changed, and the cognitive load from a messaging perspective that people are being inundated with is insane. So we have to work harder and harder and harder to try and create something that is, you know, absolutely brilliant from a thinking perspective that really is, and whether that's humor or whether that's stunts or whether that's building brands over time or whatever it may be, it's like there's only one thing that's going to work, and that's something that really is a great idea. As far as that's how we think, because mediocrity and sort of safety are like lifelong bedfellows. Like there's no point in being safe. There's no point in trying to, just test the waters a little bit. I think all the best work that I've ever done has been linked fundamentally to a great client that really wanted to do something good. And if you don't have that, then it's always going to be a battle. So look, again, long story short, I think it's harder today to create work that really stands the test of time. Or really cuts through and sort of captures the imagination of the public or your target audience. But that's why we, as a sort of executive creative director talking to my teams or my creatives or like your students, for example, Dina, like you have to be prolific. Like you can't come up with a great idea every day, but if you constantly strive for greatness, and if you constantly strive to really create something that is different and that it's good and that is brave, then you'll start to come up with more and more good ideas. 9 out of 10 die. That's just life, and there's a million reasons why. But if you constantly are prolific in terms of striving for great thinking, then the chances are you'll do some work, you'll do some good stuff, and you'll make some brands famous, and you'll get some clients promoted.
Sorry, just to add on that, but the other thing I think is really important is the ability to get those out and out quickly, and that's where automation comes in. And there was an awesome example the other day, I think on LinkedIn, I don't know, somewhere, and there were two Porsche ads next to each other, one from the 80s and one from like this year. And the one from the 80s was classically cool and really funny and like, obviously beautiful ATL top agency thought up. And the one from this year was like, literally introducing the new Cayenne, and there was a picture of the car, and the commentary was, advertising has deteriorated, it's terrible, advertising is dead, rah, 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 digital marketing has killed advertising. And you think, actually, you know what? No, that's the client's fault for not tying together the actual campaigns that I'm pretty sure Porsche is still doing with all of their channels, so that you have a simple idea and you're making sure that that's translatable and packageable through multiple channels. Because the reality is you have to compete on all of these channels. You have to put out the bite-sized pieces that, just to maintain that sort of share of voice in some of this clutter, and whether that's right or wrong is a whole different panel discussion. But, that idea has to translate into that simple JPEG that's going to be flashing up on, some programmatic somewhere. Otherwise, the client has failed to tie those pieces together. And that's, I think, one of the big challenges that we're trying to think about in terms of how do we look at, transformation, automation going forward.
Absolutely. Both of you have answered, I think, but if we want to look at, we want to avoid more mediocre work. We do understand that some campaigns have to be just, they have a very clear objective and that's it. It's not meant to be a long-standing kind of a campaign, but the brand and its story is something that should remain, kind of enduring. How can we improve the process, the whole process? How can we, from client to agency to platform, what is the ideal process or the best practice work process that can give us campaigns that are effective cross platforms? You could give us maybe like three main rules.
I mean, this is a slightly different answer to the entire question that you've just asked, but one of the things we are doing with our clients, and to earlier points and earlier discussions, the client needs to, you need to consider yourself as one team, and you need to be, working together throughout the journey from initial sort of planning all the way to sort of the launch of whatever you're doing. But one of the things that we have been working on recently is literally just the simplicity of sort of less is more. And there is some marketing calendars are so packed with so many things that we're trying to communicate so much that actually maybe if we sit down and really focus on what within those marketing calendars are the most important things from a brand perspective that we need to be talking about, or from a product launch perspective, or tactically, and then actually just looking at, okay, focusing in on, half of this and doing it twice as good, so that you really, really cut through and really make some difference. So that's not quite fully answering your question, Dina, but it's one thing I wanted to get out of my head.
Okay, excellent. Amy?
Again, probably not quite answering your question, but what are we doing to address this? One of the things that I think we've got to do is equip and empower every member of the team, and make sure that, inspiration isn't the territory of one brand person and one brand agency. And that, I think, is really important. And I think it's kind of the same as what Paul is saying, but it's very the same as my Porsche example. If you've got a beautiful inspirational brand campaign, but when you get down to your product, you're doing, here's my car, you've failed, right? Because your brand is as good as the touch points and the experiences the customer has of it. So, improving, everybody's got to be able to write in the right tone of voice. Everybody's got to be able to, look at a piece of work really quickly and say, it's on tone of voice, it's not, and therefore something needs to change. Everybody's got to be able to say, you know what, this is not exciting, I say no, and push it up the chain. And that to me is about making sure that our people aren't, automation, media optimization button pushers, but that they remain, real true marketeers with a vision of, what the customer wants and needs, and how we are going to surprise and delight them. Sorry, I hate that term, which is why I say it in such a sarcastic manner, but it is actually true.
Or at least relate to them, relate to them and affect them.
Yeah, yes. But we've got to try for more than relate. We've got to try for, excite and yeah.
Fed.
The only thing I will say, and kind of being in the middle, we receive the advertising and the content that are put out by agencies and brands, is take risks. There are thousands upon thousands of ways that you can measure risk before you actually put it out into the field, before you put anything out in the field, like services that will allow you to test your concepts and your creatives within 24 hours notice and get feedback on them. Talk to each other, talk to your platform partners, and take iterative risks. If you're going to develop a brand that stands out, okay, it has to stand out because it's doing something different, right? Which means sometimes straying away from the norm, staying away from the safe, to be able to gain competitive advantage, right? There's risk and reward. So for all the brands that might be listening to this, there are ways for you to mitigate risk and still look brave. Try them.
I think we're running out of time, but sounds interesting. If I want to recap, I heard the words brave so many times. I heard, us talking about all of us working together, all parties concerned working together. So that would take a lot of trust as well. And then trying to, be brave, but also be wise. So doing it properly, and also understanding our audiences across platforms. That becomes a bit more difficult, but it's the same process, I guess. Yep. Anything else you would like to add? about best practice for producing cross-platform campaigns?
I'll just give people Paul's number. I think that's the best way to get it done.
I don't have anything else to add on that, but my favorite question in the chat is that did we have to introduce MC Hammer to everybody's kids, which I think is fantastic. I'd just like to say that we didn't personally do that campaign, or anyone on this call for that matter, just in case you were wondering.
Could be. Bless them. Okay, Austin?
Thanks, guys. That was absolutely brilliant. I was going to try and sum it up, but I think that Dina did a good job of it. You said it has to be brave and wise and engaging, which I think is a very good summary of this panel. So thanks, guys. That was really good. There was also some really good sort of conversations and questions going on in the chat, and we don't have time for questions, but it's obviously a topic that everybody's sort of really looking into and really engaged in, and you guys sort of brought it to life from a load of different viewpoints. So thanks so much for that. That was moderated by the one and only Dina Faur, who's the Professor of Advertising at the American University of Dubai, by Paul Banham, Mullen Mina's Regional Executive Creative Director, and Fahd Osman, the Regional Director of Global Business Marketing at TikTok, and Amy Peters, who is the Group Head of Marketing Communications at Mashreq Bank. Thank you so much, guys. That was absolutely fantastic. Look, you're making me hungry too, Dina.
Thank you.
Yes.
Our pleasure.
I don't know whether Cheetos will never give us Cheetos again, or whether they're.
Sorry, I can't sign off because my hands, I have cheated.
Cheetle. Oh, Cheeto dust. Who knows? First time it's ever been used in real life. So thank you so much, guys. Really appreciate that.
Thanks.
And thanks to everyone. That's all we've got time for. Once again, thanks to our sponsors, MMS and TikTok. MMS is MBC Group's commercial arm, connecting brands and people with premium content and driving growth for brands through different offerings and solutions across the group's platforms, appropriately enough, as we heard from in the first panel. TikTok's immersive short-form videos give businesses a platform to participate and engage with a community known for its creativity, ingenuity and joy, as we heard from again in the second panel. Thanks to all of our speakers. You can find out more about all we've discussed and find writing by and about our panelists in Campaign Middle East, on campaignme.com, in our newsletters, on our social channels, on our podcasts, and through webinars like this, in fact, across platforms. So do remember to get in touch with us for our out-of-home guide, which is coming up soon. Watch out for our production house guide and our power list coming out at the end of the month. Thanks to everybody for attending and making up the campaign community. I'm really looking forward to seeing you all in person at our Marcoms event in November. So I've been Austin Allison, the editor of Campaign Middle East. Thank you again. Until next time, stay safe and goodbye.